My dad stole my college scholarship money and threatened to unalive himself because I was angry. I said go ahead. I am currently a college freshman. I am on a full ride to my university. Every semester, I get a check sent to my house to pay off my housing costs, which is about $9,000. My unemployed father got evicted from my old address because he wasn't paying rent, so my family started living in a hotel. I was questioning how they were paying for the hotel, considering it was $150 a night. Turns out, my father used my college check to cash out and pay for the hotel for 2 months. I begged him to pay off my college housing costs for 2 months straight. He lied to me, telling me that it was attached to some funds, which were hard to get out. Very confusing, but keep in mind I have absolutely zero financial literacy and my father never went into depth. I brushed it off, hoping that everything would work for the best. My college housing gave my father a deadline to pay off housing costs, November 1st. I was stressed for 2 months, unable to eat well, sleep, socialize, etc. If my dad doesn't pay it off, I may or may not have to drop out. When the deadline hit, I called my dad and asked him why he hadn't paid off my housing costs. He finally revealed that he used the check on the hotel we were living in. I was furious and I started interrogating him like a prosecutor. He blamed the family for being responsible for using my college money, not himself, and also blamed me. He lent me allowance money for 2 months, telling me that it was from my relatives when it was actually from my $9,000 housing check. I asked him why he would do this and he said that he didn't want to stress me out. I cried telling him I worked way too hard in high school for me to drop out. I said that he owed me an apology 3 times over the phone, but he refused because he thought he had done nothing wrong since he was providing for the family. I asked him again and he said sorry in a mocking voice. I told him that he was full of poop and he started saying that he wants to put a gun to his head and kill himself and it will all be on me. This is not the first time he has done that. I told him to do it and I hung up. My mom called me and I informed her about the situation. She told me to apologize to my dad and I told her as psychotic as I may sound, I have no remorse, especially after what he did. My mom threatened to disown me but I somehow mended things with them for 3 weeks. It is currently Thanksgiving break and my father still didn't pay off my check and he said that he would get money Saturday to pay it off. My mom told me again to apologize to him after he paid my housing costs, and I said I would avoid conflict, but I think I'm way too stubborn to apologize, especially because I genuinely think I have nothing to be sorry for. My dad never fully apologized and made a joke out of me to the family. Update 2.5 months later. First and foremost, immediately after this happened, I managed to get a separate debit card without my parents knowing. I don't have a job now, but I'm looking to get one later on in the semester. I didn't go to the financial aid center because my dad somehow managed to pay me back. I'm going under the assumption that it's through my grandmother's social security checks. Last December, after weeks of calling my father to make up for my scholarship money and pay me back, he finally sent me a check for $9,000. The check came in my dorm mail around midnight. I was asleep by then and my dad was spam calling my phone to tell me it was in the mail. I didn't call him back until 1 in the afternoon because I had an exam that day. He started cursing at me, telling me how he couldn't sleep all night because I didn't answer my phone. I talked back and said, the stress you put me through for 3 months by lying about my scholarship check is nothing compared to the stress you went through for a day. He started insulting me in every way possible, telling me that I was spoiled. I swore back saying are you effing serious, and he hung up. Moments later, my dad made my mom call me because he didn't want to argue with me. She screamed at me saying that I should always have respect for him as a father and that I should apologize for swearing. I said that yes, I did swear at him, but he did too, calling me bunch of slurs and whatnot. She also accused me of purposely ignoring them when I made it clear several times that I was asleep and I had an exam at 9 in the morning, hence not calling them at midnight. I told her that we shouldn't even have this talk because he was clearly in the wrong in this entire situation and every other kid would have gone to the financial aid center and my dad would have gotten in trouble. My mom misunderstood me for saying that I was going to report my dad. She had a mental breakdown and hung up. Moments later, my dad called and told me to go ahead and report him because I would be going to jail instead of him because he sent me some of the money from the check, which is bullshit. I called him out on his bullshit and he said that he was permanently severing ties so I could learn my lesson. He hung up. I didn't call them for a week until I realized that I didn't have a place to stay for winter break. My dorm closed. I swallowed my pride and called them back to apologize. They said they'll accept me back to the family. This honestly still keeps me up at night, but I literally didn't have a choice but to stay with them over break. Over break, they've noticed that I'm way more cold and distant towards them and they still wonder why. Luckily, I got the $9,000 check from my university to pay for this semester's housing fees. The best thing that came out of this is that I ended up reconnecting with my estranged sister, F25. Long story short, my father financially abused my sister for years, maxing out her credit cards and leaving her $20,000 in debt. They cut all ties a year ago after my sister started dating a guy they didn't approve of. When I was on good terms with them, they painted her as the bad guy, telling me that she betrayed them by choosing her boyfriend over the entire family. I also didn't know that my dad financially abused her. Turns out she was in the same situation I was in and ended up dropping out because my dad didn't let her take out a student loan. I talked to my sister and she said that she was honestly glad that she severed ties with them because she's finally financially independent, even if she's not financially stable. We're closer than ever and I probably consider her as a shoulder to lean on. Mentally, I'm really not doing well. I'm generally stoic, but this is taking a hard emotional toll on me because my family was my world. Before college, I always knew my father was insane, but my mother was my ride or die. I told her everything. I helped her through her marital problems. She told me everything. And the fact that she chose my abusive, unemployed father, the man that she always talked about wanting to divorce, over her daughter is heartbreaking. She still expects me to be her armchair therapist and she told me she wants me to act like how I did before. I told her over break that no matter what she does, she will never mend back the trust I had for her then. And my father, Despite his flaws, I never expected him to use my check. He put such a huge emphasis on education and told me he wanted me to have the life he never had. And knowing he would sacrifice my education just so he could live in a fancy $150 hotel is very disheartening. Recently, I've been very isolated. I still talk to a few people, my grades are falling, and I haven't been eating or sleeping well. Maybe this situation should be a wake-up call for me, but I've come to the point where I'm completely apathetic about everything. I refrain from drugs thankfully, but even so, I feel like my life is on autopilot. Final update, I am glad to say that he no longer has access to my finances and I am in low contact with him. Thanks to the advice of this subreddit, I got my social security card and other documents months before I left for college. I also managed to get my first job. I distanced myself from my parents and I took a lot of time to reflect on them and their actions. They also distanced themselves from me after I finally put my foot down and refused to give them financial assistance. They said that I was self-absorbed and once again my father told me he would kill himself if I didn't help him. I told him that's a decision he would make and I can't be responsible for it. I realized no matter what I do, they'll never change. They will always be the type of people to financially leech off of others using their suicide threats and weaponizing self-pity. But they're too emotionally stunted to see the faults of that. Their psyche is so twisted and I spent a lot of time mourning for the parents I never had. They were never meant to be parents, but they're also people. Sometimes people like them exist. As for my mother, she completely turned her back on me and said that I was a TV villain for not giving my father the money he deserved for raising me and my siblings. I told her he was never emotionally present as a father and neither was she. Not just from the suicide threats, but also by being a threat to our well-being. She used to treat me as a friend and therapist, but rarely as a daughter. She used me to complain about the emotional and mental abuse my dad inflicted on her. But at the same time, she was also the person to turn her back on me in a blink of an eye, if it meant protecting my father's feelings and making him happy. Sometimes, she went as far as to attack me or my siblings if we did anything to make him cross. I guess I still have a lot of pity for her considering that she is an illegal immigrant in an abusive situation. But it doesn't outweigh the damage. It was impossible to communicate with her since he was her own little world. I don't think she really loved me or saw me as a person or a child, just an outlet for her emotional dysfunction. Recently my mother called me and lied about my dad being ill so they could rake a couple of bucks from me again. I told them to find their own source of money and hung up. I check up on my little brothers every now and then. They're currently still living in the hotel. While their physical safety isn't harmed, I still struggle with the guilt of leaving them behind and I'm unclear on what the future holds for them. This past year, I learned what it meant to be independent, not just financially, but to be free from the mental control of them and making those decisions for myself. Needless to say, I'm happier, I'm surrounded by good and caring people, my grades aren't great but better, and I'm finally in a good place right now. In the end, everything's gonna be alright, and even if it's not the end.